I never thought I'd have to live with Robert again. If you'd asked me a month earlier who the last person on earth I'd want as a roommate was, I wouldn't have needed a second to answer. Robert. We'd grown up on the same street, gone to the same schools, played on the same teams, and somehow managed to turn every single part of our childhood into a competition. Math tests, basketball games, video games. Who got better grades? Who got invited to more parties? Who won student council elections? Even something as stupid as mowing the lawn became a contest because our parents couldn't stop comparing us. Why can't you be more like Robert? My dad said that so often I could probably still recite it in my sleep. Robert's parents weren't much better. John beat you on the history exam? Better study harder. Maybe none of them meant any harm. Maybe they thought competition built character. All it built between us was 20 years of resentment. We weren't enemies in the dramatic movie sense. We never got into fights. We never tried to ruin each other's lives. We simply hated losing to each other. Whenever one of us succeeded, the other felt like he'd failed. It was exhausting. College finally gave me an escape. I moved 3 hours away, rented an apartment with 2 friends, and for the first time in my life I wasn't constantly measuring myself against Robert. Life became peaceful. I finished my business degree. Started an internship that actually paid well. Made friends who had never heard Robert's name. For nearly 4 years, I barely thought about him. Then my landlord sold the building. We all had 30 days to move out. My 2 roommates already had plans. One was moving in with his girlfriend. The other got a job overseas. I suddenly had exactly 1 month to find somewhere affordable. Which, in a college town during summer, was nearly impossible. Every apartment was either way too expensive or already taken. After 2 weeks of searching, I was desperate enough to answer an online listing that simply read: private bedroom, shared apartment, rent below market price, looking for 1 roommate. No photos of the current tenant. No name. Just an address. I scheduled a viewing. When I knocked on the apartment door 2 days later, I was mostly worried about mold, loud neighbors, or hidden fees. The door opened. Robert stared at me. For a full 5 seconds neither of us spoke. He looked exactly how I remembered him. Maybe taller. Maybe broader. Older, obviously. But he still had that calm expression that always irritated me because nothing ever seemed to shake him. His eyebrows slowly lifted. "John!" I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because my brain refused to process what I was seeing. "You've got to be kidding me." I was about to say the same thing. Neither of us moved. Neither of us smiled. Finally Robert stepped aside. "You might as well come in." I almost turned around. Actually, I should have. Instead, I walked inside. The apartment was surprisingly nice. Modern kitchen. Large living room. 2 bedrooms. Everything clean. Too clean. "You live here alone?" I asked. "My previous roommate moved in with his fiancée." "Convenient." He shrugged. "I guess." Silence settled between us. It felt strangely familiar. Like we'd never spent 4 years apart. "So," Robert finally said, "you need a roommate?" "I do. I need one too. Apparently." Another silence. This one somehow felt even worse. I looked around again. The apartment really was perfect. Close to work. Affordable. Quiet neighborhood. Exactly what I'd been looking for. Which made it even more frustrating. Because the only thing wrong with it was him. Robert crossed his arms. "I assume this isn't going to happen." "I assume you're right." He nodded once. "Fair enough." I turned toward the door. Then stopped. "Out of curiosity." He waited. "You seriously don't have anyone else interested? I've shown the place to 6 people. And they found something else." "Why?" He gave me a tired smile. "Because I told them I work nights 3 days a week. That's it." They wanted someone with a normal schedule. I frowned. You work nights? Hospital administration. Since when? About a year. That surprised me. Not because of the job. Because Robert had actually answered a question without sounding competitive. It almost felt normal. He noticed my expression. What? Nothing. You made that face. What face? The one that says you're judging me? I wasn't. You definitely were. There it is. What? The arguing. I sighed. We've been talking for 2 minutes. And we're already doing this. He wasn't wrong. That was the annoying part. Neither of us even seemed capable of having a regular conversation. Everything immediately turned into some tiny contest. Who was right? Who got the last word? Who sounded smarter? Robert rubbed the back of his neck. Look. What? We're 24 now. I know how old I am. My point is, we're not kids anymore. I folded my arms. And maybe we'd survive living together. I stared at him. Had Robert just suggested this? You can't be serious. I am. You hated me. I don't think hate is the right word. Oh, really? We competed. We absolutely hated each other. We were pushed into competing. I opened my mouth. Closed it again. Because he wasn't entirely wrong. Every birthday party. Every family barbecue. Every school event. Someone had always compared us. Eventually we'd started doing it ourselves. Robert leaned against the kitchen counter. I honestly don't even know if we ever disliked each other. Or just liked winning. That sentence caught me completely off guard. Because I'd never thought about it that way. Maybe neither had he. I looked around the apartment one more time. I thought about the dozen overpriced places I'd already visited. About sleeping on my friend's couch. About commuting over an hour every day. None of those options sounded appealing. Robert broke the silence. No pressure. I looked at him. If you find somewhere else, take it. And if I don't? He hesitated. Then shrugged. I guess we try not to kill each other. For the first time since opening the door. I almost smiled. Almost. I'm making absolutely no promises. I wouldn't expect any. Maybe that should have been my warning. Because if someone had told me then that moving in with my childhood rival would become the biggest turning point of my life, I'd have laughed in their face. I signed the lease 3 days later. Moving day felt a little like volunteering for a disaster. Every mile I drove toward the apartment, I kept asking myself the same question. What are you doing? I had every opportunity to back out. The lease hadn't officially started yet. I could have found a cheap motel for a month. I could have slept on my friend Ethan's couch. Instead, I parked outside Robert's building with a car full of boxes and a knot in my stomach. He was already outside. Waiting. I'll grab the lighter ones, he said. You don't have to. I know. He reached into the trunk before I could stop him. You packed way too many books. They're useful. You own 4 different dictionaries. They're different editions. He looked at me. Seriously? I shrugged. He shook his head, trying not to laugh. You haven't changed. Neither have you. I'll take that as an insult. It was meant as one. Good. The exchange felt oddly comfortable. Not friendly. Definitely not friendly. But familiar. Like we'd slipped back into roles we'd known our entire lives. Within an hour, most of my things were inside. My bedroom was smaller than my old one but bright enough, with a large window overlooking a quiet street. It already felt more like home than I expected. Robert stood in the hallway holding one last box. Kitchen stuff? Yeah. He opened a cabinet. We should probably figure out where everything goes. I'll stay out of your way. It's our kitchen now. That sentence caught my attention. Our kitchen. Not my kitchen. It was a tiny detail, but somehow unexpected. For the next 30 minutes, We unpacked in near silence. Every now and then we'd reach for the same cabinet. Or disagree over where something belonged. The mugs should go here. They're too far from the coffee maker. You actually organize them by distance? Obviously. That's insane. It's efficient. No, it's insane. 5 minutes later, the mugs ended up exactly where he'd suggested. I refused to admit it made more sense. Around 6 o'clock, both of us collapsed onto opposite ends of the couch. Neither of us had much energy left. Robert looked toward the kitchen. You eaten? Not since breakfast. I'm ordering pizza. I'll pay half. You don't have to. I live here. So I'm paying. He sighed dramatically. I forgot how stubborn you are. You remembered. Fair. When the pizza arrived, we sat at opposite ends of the dining table. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. Just quiet. Eventually Robert asked. So? What happened after graduation? I looked up. You actually want to know? I'm asking. I hadn't expected that. Business degree. I know. You know? My mom still talks to your mom. Of course she did. Small towns never really let people leave. I started working for a logistics company. The internship? Yeah. They hired you? 3 months ago. Congratulations. The words sounded genuine. Not forced. Not sarcastic. Just genuine. Thanks. What about you? I switched majors twice. I remember. You remember? You posted about it. You follow me? I regretted the question immediately. Robert blinked. I don't follow you. You just said. My mother shows me things. Oh. Silence. He picked up another slice. My parents still compare us sometimes. I laughed. They compare us to each other even though we're adults? They've upgraded. Meaning? My dad asked why I wasn't already a manager because apparently your father heard you're getting promoted. I stared at him. You're kidding. I wish. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. So that's still happening. Apparently. My dad told me you bought a newer car. I bought a used Honda. He described it like you'd purchased a luxury sports car. Robert smiled. My mother called to ask why I couldn't be more financially responsible. I nearly dropped my drink. You've got to be kidding. Nope. For several seconds, we just laughed. Not at each other. At them. At how ridiculous the whole thing sounded now. It felt strangely freeing. Like we'd suddenly realized either of us had created this rivalry alone. Robert leaned back. You know. What? I don't think we ever had a normal conversation growing up. I thought about it. Birthday parties. School projects. Basketball practice. Family picnics. Every memory somehow involved someone keeping score. No. I don't think we did either. He looked thoughtful. That's kind of sad. It is. The room became quiet again. But this silence felt different. Lighter. Later that evening I started unpacking my bedroom. Halfway through assembling a bookshelf, I realized one of the wooden panels was missing. No. I searched every box twice. Nothing. Great. Robert knocked lightly on my open door. You okay? My bookshelf hates me. He looked at the scattered pieces on the floor. You built it backwards. I did not. You definitely did. I've assembled this before. You attached both side panels upside down. I stared. No. He crouched beside the pieces. See? He pointed at 2 tiny holes I'd completely missed. Oh. I'll pretend I didn't see that. I'll pretend you weren't right. He laughed. Move over. I can do it. I know. 5 minutes later. The bookshelf was standing perfectly. I folded my arms. You practiced that. I read instructions. Show off. You used to call me that in 8th grade. I still mean it. He grinned. There he is. Who? The real John. What does that mean? You always complained when I beat you. I complained because you cheated. I literally never cheated. You breathed competitively. He burst out laughing. The kind that made him look younger. Less guarded. For a second, I saw the kid I'd spent years trying to beat. Not because I hated him. Because I'd been convinced I was supposed to. That realization stayed with me long after he'd gone back to his room. Maybe living together wouldn't be impossible. Maybe we'd simply spent 20 years believing we were rivals, without ever giving ourselves the chance to become anything else. I wasn't ready to call Robert a friend. Not even close. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't entirely sure he'd ever really been my enemy either. A week passed before anything actually felt different. Not because Robert and I suddenly became friends. We didn't. We simply stopped expecting every conversation to turn into an argument. It happened so gradually that I barely noticed. He left for work before I woke up on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I usually got home around 5. Some evenings we'd only see each other for 15 minutes. Other nights we'd end up talking in the kitchen while one of us cooked. Nothing important. Movies. Work. Whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It absolutely didn't. He disagreed. Which somehow didn't surprise me. One Thursday evening I came home to find him sitting at the dining table with a laptop open and 3 empty coffee mugs beside him. He looked exhausted. Long day? You could say that. You look terrible. Thanks. I meant tired. I know. I opened the refrigerator. Have you eaten? He rubbed his eyes. I forgot. You forgot? I've been working on payroll reports for 6 hours. You seriously forgot dinner? It happens. I stared at him for a second, then closed the refrigerator again. What are you doing? He asked. Making pasta. You don't have to. I know. The words sounded strangely familiar. He smiled. I've said that before. Exactly. 20 minutes later we were eating together. Robert looked almost embarrassed. I owe you one. You owe me half a bag of pasta. I'll survive that debt. We ate quietly. After a while he looked toward me. You've changed. I frowned. What? You used to get angry faster. I still do. No. I definitely do. You don't. I laughed. You've known me for 1 week. I've known you for 20 years. That stopped me. Because technically, he was right. He knew versions of me most people never had. The competitive kid. The sarcastic teenager. The college freshman who refused to lose at anything. Maybe he noticed changes other people wouldn't. You've changed too, I admitted. In what way? You actually listen now. He looked surprised. I always listened. No. You just didn't notice. I thought about that. Maybe I hadn't. Maybe either of us had. Saturday morning brought our first real disagreement. Not about anything important. Cleaning. I vacuumed last week, Robert said. So it's your turn. I cleaned the bathroom. We rotate rooms. I cleaned yours too. You volunteered. I was already cleaning. That's still volunteering. You planned this. I made a schedule. You made a spreadsheet. They're different. They're terrifying. He looked offended. My spreadsheet is organized. That's exactly why it's terrifying. 10 minutes later we were standing in the living room debating household chores like 2 lawyers. Finally Robert sighed. Rock, paper, scissors. What? Winner chooses. Seriously? Seriously. We played. He won. Naturally. I hate this game. You hate losing. I hate your face. You've said that since 6th grade. I continue to mean it. He grinned. Vacuums in the closet. I muttered something under my breath. What was that? I said congratulations. You absolutely didn't. Later that afternoon my phone rang. Dad, I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Hey. How's the new apartment? It's good. Your roommate nice? I hesitated. Yeah. What's his name? Robert. Silence. Then. Robert Miller? Yeah. The Robert? There isn't another one. Dad laughed. I never would have guessed. Neither would I. Still competing? I looked toward the living room where Robert was trying to convince a stubborn vacuum cleaner to cooperate. Not really. Huh. What? I always thought you boys would eventually figure out you were more alike than different. I frowned. You've spent 20 years comparing us. I know. And now you're saying that? I got older. His voice sounded unusually thoughtful. Parents make mistakes too, John. I didn't know what to say. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone. Parents make mistakes too. Such a simple sentence. Yet somehow, it explained years of unnecessary resentment. That evening, Robert noticed something was off. You've been quiet. My dad called. Everything okay? Yeah. What did he want? I leaned against the kitchen counter. He apologized. Robert blinked. For what? For comparing us growing up. He became very still. My mom apologized last Christmas. What? I didn't tell anyone. You never said anything. I didn't think it mattered. He gave a small shrug. Guess it mattered more than I realized. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, I asked, do you ever wonder? What? Who we'd have been if everyone hadn't treated us like competitors? Robert didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the kitchen window. I think about that more often than I'd like. So do I. He smiled faintly. You know something funny? What? I always thought you hated me. I thought you hated me. I didn't. I didn't either. The words left both of us strangely quiet. Because once they were spoken, years of assumptions suddenly looked ridiculous. I was jealous, Robert admitted. I laughed. Of me? You were always better at talking to people. What? You made friends everywhere. I thought everyone liked you more. They respected me. They liked you. I'd honestly never seen it that way. I wanted your confidence. I wanted yours. We both laughed. You know, I said. We're idiots. The evidence is overwhelming. For the first time, there was no competition in the room. No invisible scoreboard. No need to prove anything. Just two guys who'd spent most of their lives misunderstanding each other. As we cleaned the kitchen together, I caught myself watching Robert for a moment. Noticing little things I'd ignored before. The way he absent-mindedly hummed while washing dishes. How he always dried the counter after wiping it. How he smiled to himself whenever he solved a small problem. They weren't dramatic discoveries. Just ordinary ones. The kind you only make after living with someone. And somewhere between sharing dinners, arguing over chores, and laughing about our childhood, I realized something that made me surprisingly nervous. I was beginning to look forward to coming home. Not because of the apartment. Because I knew Robert would probably be there. The first month passed faster than I expected. Living with Robert settled into something that felt effortless. Not perfect. He still folded towels in a way I considered completely irrational. He still insisted on putting ketchup in the refrigerator before opening it. And he still managed to beat me at every board game we owned. I think you're cheating. I'm not. You always say that. Because it's always true. You smile too much when you win. You pout too much when you lose. I don't pout. You absolutely pout. I strongly disagree. He laughed. You even sound like you're pouting. I tossed the game instructions onto the coffee table. I demand a rematch. You've demanded 5. I'm due. You've lost all 5. Statistics are on my side. They really aren't. By the middle of October, we had developed routines without ever discussing them. If I cooked, Robert washed the dishes. If he worked late, I'd leave dinner in the refrigerator. If one of us grabbed coffee on the way home, we'd bring a second cup without asking. None of it was planned. It just happened. One rainy Tuesday, I got home earlier than usual. The apartment was dark. Robert's shoes were still by the door. That was strange. He should have left for work an hour earlier. Robert? No answer. I knocked on his bedroom door. You awake? A tired voice answered. Yeah. You okay? Come in. I opened the door carefully. He was sitting on the edge of his bed wearing sweatpants and an old college hoodie. He looked awful. His face was pale. His eyes were tired. You look terrible. I appreciate your honesty. You sick? I think so. You think? I haven't been sick in years. I walked closer. You have a fever? I probably do. You should have called in. I tried. And? They're short-staffed. So? They asked if I could still come. And you said yes? He shrugged weakly. I usually can. I stared at him. You can barely keep your eyes open. I know. You are absolutely not going anywhere. He gave me a tired smile. You're bossy. I'm right. I know. For the first time since we moved in. Robert actually looked vulnerable. Not confident. Not organized. Not like the guy who always seemed in control. Just exhausted. I walked back toward the kitchen. Where are you going? Medicine. I probably have some. Probably? I don't remember. You seriously don't know? I'm not the sick one. 5 minutes later I'd found pain relievers, a thermometer, soup, and enough tea to supply a small cafe. Robert watched me from the doorway. You've done this before. My younger sister caught every cold known to humanity. So you're experienced. I'm experienced with stubborn patients. I'm not stubborn. I raised an eyebrow. You went to work with a fever. Fair. By evening his temperature had climbed even higher. He looked miserable. You should sleep. I've been sleeping all day. Then sleep more. I'll never fall asleep tonight. You look like you're about to. I'm trying to prove you wrong. You don't have the energy. I don't. He actually admitted it. That alone told me how bad he felt. I handed him another mug of tea. Thanks. No problem. He looked down at it. You know. What? I don't think anyone's taken care of me since college. What happened then? My mom drove 2 hours because I got the flu. I smiled. Parents never really stop being parents. I guess not. A few seconds passed. You didn't have to do all this. I know. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He looked at me quietly. I appreciate it. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. It wasn't dramatic. Just honest. Robert stayed home the next day too. By afternoon he was already looking better. I survived. Barely. I was never dying. You acted like it. I absolutely did not. You complained because your soup was too hot. It was. You complained because your tea cooled down. Also true. You complained because I opened the curtains. The sunlight was aggressive. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. You are impossible. I've been told. He leaned back against the couch. You know what's weird? What? This feels. He searched for the word. Comfortable. I knew exactly what he meant. Neither of us felt like we had to pretend anymore. The apartment had stopped feeling like shared space. It felt like home. Friday evening, Robert was finally healthy enough to return to work. As he grabbed his keys, he paused. I'm off tomorrow. So am I. You want to grab breakfast somewhere? The question sounded casual. Almost too casual. I looked up from my laptop. You mean? As roommates. He immediately looked embarrassed. I mean, unless you already have plans. I smiled. I don't. 8? Works for me. He nodded once. Good. Then he left. The apartment suddenly felt strangely quiet. I frowned. It had only been 30 seconds. Yet I already noticed he wasn't there. That realization made me uncomfortable. Not because it was bad. Because I wasn't sure what it meant. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and cold autumn air. We walked 3 blocks to a small diner neither of us had ever visited. The hostess smiled. "Table for 2?" Robert answered before I could. "Yeah." Simple. Natural. For some reason, hearing him say it made something shift inside me. We slid into a booth by the window. Coffee arrived first. "So," I asked. "What? Are we actually friends now?" Robert looked genuinely surprised. "I thought we already were." I blinked. "You did? I mean..." He smiled awkwardly. "We spend almost every evening together. We eat together. We make fun of each other. You took care of me all week." "I don't know." He laughed. "That sounds like friendship to me." I looked down at my coffee. Maybe he was right. Maybe somewhere between childhood rivalry and shared routines, we'd quietly become friends without either of us noticing. And somehow, that realization made me happier than I expected. Breakfast became a tradition without either of us officially deciding it would. The following Saturday, Robert asked if I wanted to go back to the same diner. The Saturday after that, I asked first. Eventually, the waitress stopped asking whether we wanted menus. She already knew our orders. "You 2 roommates?" she asked one morning while topping off our coffee. Robert nodded. "Yeah. Best roommates I've had in here." I laughed. "Is that an award?" "You'd be surprised." She walked away before either of us could answer. Robert stirred his coffee absent-mindedly. "You know." "What?" "I don't think we've argued in weeks." I thought about it. He was right. We still teased each other constantly. Still challenged each other over pointless things. But the edge was gone. The need to win had quietly disappeared. Late one afternoon, I came home carrying 2 grocery bags. The apartment was unusually loud. Music drifted from the kitchen. Robert was singing. Badly. Very badly. I stood in the doorway for almost 30 seconds before he noticed me. He turned around, wooden spoon in one hand. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." "You heard that?" "I heard all of it." He groaned dramatically. "You weren't supposed to." "I don't think the neighbors had a choice." "I hate you." "No, you don't." "No." He smiled despite himself. "I was making dinner." "I can see that." "Pasta." "Again? You like pasta?" "I do." "So stop complaining." I laughed. "You've become awfully confident." "I live with you." "Your standards dropped." They really did. Dinner turned into one of those conversations that wandered in every direction. Work. Movies. Travel. Childhood memories. At one point I asked, "Do you remember the middle school science fair?" Robert immediately covered his face. "Oh no. You remember." "I've spent years trying to forget." "You built a volcano." "You built a bridge." "My bridge collapsed." "My volcano exploded." "It caught the curtain on fire." "It was a small fire." "The principal evacuated the gym." "We were 12. I started laughing so hard my stomach hurt. "You blamed me." "You were laughing?" "Because your volcano launched across the room." "It wasn't supposed to." "It landed on Mr. Ellis." Robert buried his face in his hands. "I cannot believe you remember that." "I'll remember it forever." "You've waited years to bring this up." "I absolutely have." He pointed his fork at me. "You're a terrible person." "So I've been told." A few days later, I was sorting old boxes in my closet when I found something I hadn't seen in years. A faded photo album. Curious, I carried it into the living room. Robert looked up from his laptop. "What's that?" "My childhood." "Oh no." "Oh yes." I sat beside him. The first few pages were family vacations. birthday parties, school pictures. Then, there. Robert leaned closer. No way. A Little League team photo. We couldn't have been older than 10. Standing in the front row. Both of us missing our front teeth. Either of us smiling. We look furious. We probably were. Do you remember why? I looked closer. Then laughed. The coach made us share captain. Robert groaned. I forgot about that. We argued the entire season. Over who got to carry equipment. Who got to flip the coin. Who stood in the middle. He shook his head. We were ridiculous. We really were. We turned another page. School field trip. Halloween parade. Neighborhood barbecue. Every few pages. There we were. Always standing a few feet apart. Always pretending not to notice each other. It's weird, I said quietly. What? We were in each other's lives constantly. Yeah. But I don't think I ever actually knew you. Robert didn't answer immediately. Instead, he kept looking through the album. I don't think I knew you either. That Friday evening, Ethan called. How's living with your mortal enemy? I laughed. He's not my mortal enemy anymore. Oh? We actually get along. Seriously? Yeah. There was a pause. Dude. What? You talk about him differently. I do not. You do. How? I don't know. You sound. He searched for the word. Happy. I rolled my eyes. I like having a roommate that cleans. Sure. And cooks. And doesn't leave dirty dishes everywhere. John. What? You've smiled 3 times during this phone call. I smile. You used to complain about Robert every chance you got. That was years ago. And now? I looked toward the kitchen. Robert was trying to reach something on the highest shelf while muttering to himself. Without thinking, I smiled again. Now he's just Robert. Ethan went suspiciously quiet. You've got feelings for him. I nearly dropped my phone. What? You heard me. Absolutely not. John. We're friends. That's not what I asked? I laughed nervously. You've officially lost your mind. Maybe. But I'm usually right. I'm hanging up now. You didn't answer. Goodbye, Ethan. I ended the call before he could say another word. Ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. I looked toward the kitchen again. Robert had finally reached the cereal box. He held it up triumphantly. I won. You won against a cabinet. It was a difficult opponent. I laughed despite myself. What? Nothing. You've got that weird smile. I do not. You definitely do. I looked away. My pulse felt strangely unsteady. Ethan was wrong. He had to be. Robert was my roommate. My friend. The last person I'd expected to reconnect with. That was all. Wasn't it? I spent the next few days trying to prove Ethan wrong. Which, unfortunately, required thinking about Robert far more than I wanted to. Every time I caught myself noticing something about him, I mentally dismissed it. He's just your roommate. When he brought me coffee after an early meeting? A nice roommate. When he picked up my favorite cereal because it was on sale? A thoughtful roommate. When he texted to ask if I wanted him to bring dinner home because he'd be passing my favorite restaurant? Just a really considerate roommate. That was all. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The following Thursday, I got stuck at work much later than expected. A software update had gone wrong. Nothing worked. Everyone stayed late. By the time I finally left the office, it was almost 9. I unlocked the apartment door quietly. The lights were still on. Robert looked up from the couch almost immediately. There you are. I blinked. Yeah. I was about to call. You were? You never stay this late. I got trapped. He looked relieved. I figured. I frowned. You were worried? He shrugged, suddenly interested in the television. A little. The answer was so casual that it somehow felt more sincere. I should have texted. It would have been nice. I'm sorry. No big deal. But I could tell it had been. There was a plate covered with foil sitting on the kitchen counter. I made extra. You waited? I wasn't hungry yet. I looked at the clock. It was almost 9:30. You didn't eat dinner? He rubbed the back of his neck. I figured we'd eat together. Something warm settled quietly in my chest. No one had waited for me like that in a very long time. The weekend brought the first real cold weather of the season. Saturday morning, I walked into the living room to find Robert standing by the window. It's snowing. I joined him. Tiny flakes drifted through the air. The first one this year. I forgot how much I missed this. We stood there for a minute without saying anything. Then Robert smiled. Let's go. Where? For a walk. In the snow? Exactly. You're insane. Probably. 20 minutes later we were walking through the park, bundled up in jackets and scarves. Children were already trying to build tiny snowmen. Dogs raced through the fresh snow like they'd been waiting all year. It's quieter, Robert said. What is? The city. He was right. Snow always seemed to soften everything. Even traffic sounded distant. We wandered without any destination, talking about nothing in particular. At one point Robert stopped. What? You remember this? I looked where he was pointing. A small hill. People were already sledding down it. Then I laughed. No way. You pushed me down that hill. I absolutely did not. You absolutely did. You stole my sled. It was our sled. It was my sled. You tackled me. You deserved it. You threw snow down my jacket. You started it. I definitely didn't. You absolutely did. We both laughed. I can't believe you remember that, I said. I remember everything we argued about. That's concerning. It probably is. On the way home we stopped for hot chocolate. The cafe was crowded, so we shared a small table near the window. Robert wrapped both hands around his mug. You know. What? I've been thinking. That sounds dangerous. He ignored the comment. If someone had told me 6 months ago that we'd spend our Saturdays together, I would have laughed. Same. I probably would have called them crazy. You definitely would have. We smiled at each other. Not awkwardly. Not cautiously. Just naturally. That realization lingered longer than the conversation itself. A few evenings later, I got home to find Robert sitting on the floor surrounded by old storage boxes. What happened here? I'm cleaning. It looks like the opposite. He held up an old cardboard box. I found these at my parents' house. What are they? My high school things. Curiosity got the better of me. I sat beside him. Inside were old notebooks, trophies, yearbooks, and dozens of photographs. Robert picked up one picture. Oh no. What? He handed it to me. I burst out laughing. We were 17. Standing on opposite sides of a debate competition stage. Both holding second-place certificates. What happened? We tied. Oh. I was furious. I remember. I spent 2 weeks insisting the judges made a mistake. Robert laughed. I did too. I looked at him. You did? I couldn't accept that we were equally good. I stared at the photo a little longer. It's funny. What? I don't think either of us cared about winning. We cared about beating each other. Exactly. He nodded slowly. That's an important difference. As we continued sorting through the boxes, something slipped from between two folders. A folded sheet of paper. Robert picked it up. Then froze. What? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he laughed quietly to himself. I completely forgot this existed. What is it? He handed it to me. It was an old senior year questionnaire. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? I scanned his answers. Successful career. Apartment in the city. A dog. Travel. Then I noticed one final question. Who do you think you'll still know 10 years from now? Only one name had been written. John. I looked up. You wrote my name? Robert looked genuinely embarrassed. I guess. Why? He took a long breath. Because, whether we liked it or not. He smiled awkwardly. You'd always been part of my life. I didn't know what to say. For 20 years I'd assumed I barely mattered to him outside our rivalry. Yet here was proof that, even back then, he'd imagined we'd somehow remain connected. I don't even remember writing that, he admitted. I do. What? My answer. I stood up and walked to my room. A few minutes later, I returned carrying my own old memory box. After a little searching, I found the same questionnaire. Robert leaned closer as I unfolded it. The final question was identical. Who do you think you'll still know 10 years from now? There was only one name. Robert. Neither of us spoke. For a long moment, we simply looked at the papers. Two teenagers who had spent years pretending they couldn't stand each other. Had somehow both believed the other would always remain part of their future. Neither of us had ever known. Neither of us said anything for a long time. The two questionnaires lay on the coffee table between us like they belonged to two completely different people. Robert finally broke the silence. That's kind of unbelievable. I know. You wrote my name too. I guess I did. He smiled to himself. We were idiots. We've already established that. No, I mean. He tapped the papers gently. We spent years pretending we couldn't stand each other. And somehow, we both assumed we'd always be around. I nodded. It didn't make any sense. Or maybe it did. Maybe we'd mistaken familiarity for rivalry. Maybe we'd never known where one ended and the other began. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. Ethan's words came back into my head. You've got feelings for him. I rolled onto my side. No, I muttered to myself. Didn't I? I liked spending time with Robert. I trusted him. I looked forward to coming home. I noticed when he smiled. I worried when he worked too much. I liked hearing him laugh from the kitchen. That wasn't unusual. Friends did that. Didn't they? The problem was, I wasn't completely sure anymore. The following week became unusually busy. Robert picked up extra shifts. I had deadlines at work. For 3 days we barely crossed paths. Monday morning I left before he got home. Monday night he left before I woke up from an accidental nap. Tuesday we only exchanged 2 texts. Milk? Already bought some. By Wednesday evening, the apartment felt strangely empty. I was making dinner when the front door finally opened. Robert walked in looking exhausted. You look awful. That's becoming your favorite greeting. It's accurate. He dropped his backpack beside the door and stretched. I think I've worked 30 hours in 2 days. That's not healthy. I know. I handed him a plate. Eat. Yes, Mom. I'm serious. I know. He sat down immediately. For several minutes neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar. Comfortable. I'd missed it. That realization hit me before I could stop it. I'd missed him. Not having someone in the apartment. Not conversation. Him. Friday evening, Robert knocked softly on my bedroom door. You busy? A little. You want to take a break? What did you have in mind? He held up a box. Found this while cleaning. I smiled immediately. Chess? You still think you can beat me? I've improved. You say that every time. This time I mean it. 20 minutes later the board was set up. Robert made the first move. So? You've been quiet lately. I've been working. That's not what I meant. I looked up. What did you mean? He hesitated. I don't know. You seem distracted. I focused on the board. I'm fine. Liar. I am. You always scratch your eyebrow when you're pretending everything's okay. I froze. What? You've done it since middle school. I have not. You literally just did. My hand slowly dropped away from my face. Robert smiled. I told you. I stared at him. You noticed that? For years. You never said anything. You never asked? Something about that conversation stayed with me. How many little things had he noticed over the years? How many had I noticed about him? Without thinking, I answered my own question. Too many. I knew he drank coffee too quickly when he was stressed. I knew he always double-checked that the front door was locked before bed. I knew he smiled more with his eyes than with his mouth. I knew he hummed when concentrating. I knew exactly which movie could always make him laugh. None of those things happened overnight. I'd learned them gradually, without realizing how much attention I was paying. Robert interrupted my thoughts. John! It's your move. Oh. I hadn't even looked at the board. He laughed. You've definitely got something on your mind. Maybe. You planning revenge? I was considering it. Good. I'd hate to disappoint you. Saturday afternoon, Ethan invited me to watch a basketball game. I hadn't seen him in weeks. Finally, he said as we sat down with drinks. I thought your mysterious roommate had kidnapped you. He has a job. So do you. We've both been busy. He looked at me over the edge of his glass. So? How's Robert? The question came so naturally that I answered without thinking. He finally finished that awful payroll project. Good. He hasn't been sleeping enough. That's not good. I keep telling him to stop taking extra shifts. You sound worried. I am worried. Ethan didn't say anything. He just watched me. What? You still don't hear yourself? I sighed. Not this again. When's the last time you talked this much about anyone? I don't know. Exactly. I looked away. The basketball game had already started. I hadn't noticed. You know what's interesting? Ethan continued. What? You never tell stories about work anymore. So? You tell stories about Robert. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Because he was right. Without realizing it, Robert had quietly become the center of most of my everyday stories. The funny ones. The frustrating ones. The ordinary ones. It wasn't intentional. It had just happened. Ethan smiled gently. You don't have to figure everything out today. I'm not figuring anything out. Sure. I mean it. I know. He leaned back. But one day you're going to stop asking yourself whether you enjoy spending time with him. He paused. And start asking why. I didn't answer. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. I tried to ignore Ethan's words. For almost 2 weeks. Whenever my thoughts drifted toward Robert, I redirected them. Work. Laundry. Groceries. Anything else. It worked. Right up until the evening everything changed. It was a Friday. I'd had one of those days where nothing went right. A client canceled a contract. Traffic was terrible. My laptop crashed. By the time I got home, all I wanted was silence. Instead, I walked into the apartment and found the kitchen decorated with cheap paper streamers. What? Robert looked up from the stove. There you are. What is all this? He looked confused. Your promotion? I blinked. My what? Your promotion. Then I remembered. I'd mentioned, almost in passing, that my manager had officially promoted me that morning. I hadn't thought much about it afterward. You remembered? You worked hard for it. He shrugged like it was obvious. I figured it deserved dinner. For a second, I couldn't speak. Nobody had ever celebrated one of my promotions before. Not like this. Not because they simply wanted to. You did all this? It's mostly frozen lasagna. I don't care. It looked more impressive in my head. I laughed. It actually looks perfect. Dinner lasted nearly 3 hours. We talked about everything except work. At one point, Robert disappeared into his room. When he came back, he handed me a small wrapped box. You bought me something? It's not expensive. I slowly opened it. Inside was a fountain pen. Simple. Elegant. Black with silver trim. I stared at it. Months earlier, during one random conversation, I'd mentioned wanting one someday because I preferred writing notes by hand. I'd completely forgotten. Robert hadn't. I saw it a few weeks ago. He looked suddenly nervous. You don't have to like it. I looked up. It's perfect. He smiled. A quiet, genuine smile. I hoped you'd say that. Something shifted inside me. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. More like a puzzle piece quietly falling into place. I looked at him across the table. And for the first time, I stopped trying to convince myself that Ethan was wrong. A few days later, Robert and I took our usual Saturday walk. The park was almost empty. Winter had settled in completely. We ended up sitting on the same bench where we'd stopped weeks earlier during the first snowfall. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, I said, Can I ask you something? Always. I looked down at my hands. Were you really worried when I came home late that night? Yeah. Why? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched a couple walking their dog across the park. I don't know when it happened. I looked at him. But somewhere along the way, you stopped feeling like my roommate. My heart started beating faster. He laughed softly. I know that's probably a strange thing to say. No. My voice came out quieter than I expected. It isn't. He turned toward me. I kept trying to convince myself it was because we'd become good friends. And maybe that's still true. He smiled sadly. But I don't think that's the whole truth anymore. The world suddenly felt very still. I've been trying to convince myself of the same thing. His eyes searched mine. You have? I nodded. For weeks. Neither of us moved. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence. Robert finally spoke. I don't want to ruin what we have. I don't either. If you don't feel the same. I do. He blinked. What? I laughed nervously. I do. The words felt surprisingly easy once they were finally out. I think I've been falling for you for a while. He stared at me. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny. Because he looked relieved. I spent a month trying to figure out how to tell you. I spent a month trying to convince myself I was imagining it. I almost moved out. What? I thought maybe giving you space would make the feelings disappear. My eyes widened. Seriously? I even looked at apartments. I'm really glad you didn't. So am I. For a second we simply looked at each other. Then, almost at the same time, we both started laughing. We really are idiots, I said. The evidence keeps growing. I reached over. He met me halfway. Our hands found each other naturally, as though they'd been waiting for permission. No dramatic speeches. No perfect movie moment. Just warmth. Comfort. And the strange realization that the person I'd spent years trying to beat had quietly become the person I wanted beside me. Spring arrived faster than either of us expected. Life didn't transform overnight. We still argued over board games. Still debated where mugs belong. Still teased each other about middle school disasters. The only difference was that now, every Saturday morning, we walked to the diner holding hands until we reached the busy street, where we naturally let go and then find each other again a few steps later. Nothing else really changed. We were still us. Just happier. One evening, months later, we visited our parents together for a neighborhood barbecue. The same street. The same houses. The same people who had spent years comparing us. My father looked at Robert. Then at me. He smiled knowingly. I guess all those years of competition finally ended. Robert glanced at me before answering. It did. My mom laughed. So who won? I looked at Robert. He looked back at me. Then we answered together. Either of us. Because we'd finally realized something our younger selves never could. Life had never needed a winner. It had only needed us to stop standing on opposite sides. The boy I'd spent my childhood trying to defeat became my roommate, my closest friend, and eventually, the person who made every ordinary day feel like home. Looking back now, I don't remember who won the spelling bees, or the basketball games, or the science fairs. Those things don't matter anymore. What I remember is opening an apartment door and seeing Robert standing there, thinking it was the worst possible thing that could have happened to me. It turned out to be the best.